Hello, my name is Jeff McMullen with Kalilo Consulting. Today we're going to take a look at Visual Studio and talk about some of the code quality tools that are built in. Now this isn't all the list of tools that improve code quality, but here's some to get started. So we're in our Visual Studio project and we're going to open up our Test Window Explorer. In our Test Window Explorer, you'll see all our tests on the left side, and by default it starts off with showing the tests that are not ran. So let's go ahead and run all our tests. And once our tests are run, you now see our tests are grouped by default in failed test and pass test. Now let's go ahead and drill into one of our tests. We're going to open up our customer controllers test class. And in here you'll see an attribute test method. This is the default that MS Test uses to label a method as a test method. Now let's use this filter in the top left, and we're going to open up another one of our tests. Now if you notice here, this is using XUnit. It's really nice. You can mix MS Test, XUnit. So if you start off using one, you're not committed to using the other throughout the test slot. So now let's go ahead and repeat last test. And I want to show, if you look at our first test, it took 46 milliseconds to run. Once we rerun the test and it completes, you'll now notice it actually jumped down to 21 milliseconds. This is because it takes some time to load the test runner, so the next couple of times you run it, it will be quicker. So we're going to go to this test that's failed. And if you look at line 72, we have some code that's commented out to show it's going to fail. And at the bottom left, you can see the exception. You can also click here to the source to also go to the test. So let's go ahead and make this test pass. And the nice thing is we don't have to run all our tests. We're able to just right click on the test that failed and run selected tests. You can also select multiple tests if you like and run a couple tests as well. Alright, so this test is now passed. The next thing I'm going to introduce you to is live unit testing. This is something, if you're familiar with like client-side coding, where you make a change and it automatically tests your change. This is something very similar to that. So once live unit testing is turned on, you'll start seeing these check marks or these extra icons to the left. When you see this green check icon, that means, hey, this is currently passing. So let's go ahead and make this test not pass. And go to line 72, and we're going to comment our line of code. Now, I want you to notice that I'm not clicking the save button. In real time, this reran the test, and now we see the X saying, hey, this is a test that's failed. Another thing we'll see if we scroll down a little bit is the blue dash that shows, hey, these lines weren't even ran. Once the test failed 82, it didn't continue on. The next thing we're going to hop into is showing some of the various ways to group the tests. Now, this can be very important. It's helping like organize things. You can group by project, group by traits, group by just a number of factors. Now we're going to go into the traits grouping a little bit more in detail. Traits are one of those things that's very powerful to me when I'm doing setting up CD for companies. So I want to add a test category of unit. And after the video, I want to get into something that's been very helpful to me, like I said, again setting up CD. So I'm going to build a project and right click over here and go by group by and group by traits, and now we can see unit. Like I said, this will come in handy, and I'll get more in detail at this at the end of the video. Now the next thing I want to go into is creating a playlist. So we can just right click, add to a playlist, and we'll just type in a name. Now in the right corner where currently it says playlist all tests, we can go to that, select, and click unit test, and this is the playlist that we just created. Underneath the covers, these things are just saved as XML files, so you can really edit it directly if you want to, but it's fairly straightforward to add to a playlist from the tool. So now let's go back to all tests, and the next thing we're going to introduce is analyzing our code coverage. So here we are running the analyze tool, and at the bottom we can actually scroll down, open up, and we can see our number of blocks covered. If you want to look at it by lines, just right click, add lines, And now we can see what our blocks cover, what lines are covered. We can look at this by DLL. We can look at this by project. We can look at it by namespace, class. Really drill down all the way down to the method level. And one nice thing from here is we can actually just click in here and it will take us to the code that's covered. Like here we can hover over and see which tests are actually covering the method as well. Another thing is, like, you don't have to analyze the whole solution. You can actually just run one test or right click one test and analyze that specific test, and it will do the code coverage based on what DLLs, what namespaces are brought in, and it's easy to change what code coverage files we're listening to, or we can actually save these files and send them to somebody else. So one of the other useful tools is analyzing code for code coverage, or I'm sorry, for code duplicates. And at the bottom, we can easily see, hey, these are strong matches. We can hover over and actually see the line that seems to be duplicated. Again, we can just double click on here and it will open up the files and take us to the code that is duplicated. Let me go ahead and close out some of these other tabs. And another useful thing I want to show is opening up both classes in a horizontal view. Let's figure out, okay, line 54 and 68 are clones and line 74 and 89 are clones, and this is the assign schedule method. And if we scroll down, we can actually see, yeah, these lines are basically a copy of each other, and this would be a really good candidate for some refactoring. Another way to look at code duplications is actually open up, going to some code, highlighting it. So we're going to go to our create method, highlight these three lines of code, and say, hey, search the rest of the solution. And it went through the solution and found some candidates that, hey, whether exact match, strong match, and this can give us an idea of maybe there's some code out there that we can just call. I want to show this slide. Early in the video, I talked about test categories and how they can be helped to organize for CD. Below are four test categories that I would suggest using at a minimum, and you can always have multiple categories on a specific test. Unit tests, these have just been something that, hey, there's no external dependencies. Component tests is something your team does have control over the application, like such as a database it uses. Integration, is communicating to different various things in UI. That's your Selenium frameworks, your Kodi UI frameworks. So this is something that has been helpful, is setting up CD.